But after the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, the lines between the two Cold War camps were relatively clear and mutually understood. The exception of places like West Berlin, people knew where the lines were. And it was pretty clear what an act of aggression would be across one of those lines by either of the superpower camps. And that's just not true in East Asia today, and that's very challenging. And if we look at the political psychology work of Amos Tversky, a Stanford professor, and the Nobel laureate colleague of mine at Princeton, Daniel Kahneman, they show that humans are much more willing to take risks and to pay costs to defend what they believe is rightfully theirs than they are to get new things. Most people. There are exceptions from history. Hitler, thank God he's an exception. But most humans in most places are willing to pay higher costs and take bigger risks to defend what they believe is rightfully theirs than to gain new things. So when you have clear lines between two potential adversaries, it's a very useful thing because crossing that line is relatively easy to deter because it's clearly delineated what would be an aggression and what would not be. In East Asia, that's not the case. You have several claimants in the South China Sea, including China. You have claimants to the Diaoyu Senkaku Islands, Senkaku Diaoyu Islands, whichever you want to put it, right? In the East China Sea. And it's my strong impression from talking to people in the various capitals in those disputes that they all truly believe that their claims are legitimate. They're all sincere. From Tversky and Kahneman's point of view, this is the worst possible outcome. They all believe they're defending something that is rightfully theirs, and if they give it up, they're going to lose something bad, and they might lose more things in the future. That makes them more likely to stand firm in any conflicts or crises that arise over those conflicts. And there's a lot of post-colonial nationalism I mentioned in China. Well, there's a lot of post-colonial nationalism in other parts of East Asia as well, including in places like Malaysia, which is a dispute in the South China Sea, including in the Philippines and Vietnam, for example. So that feeds that problem. So how do you deter or dissuade China from using force to settle its many disputes? It's not always easy, and as China develops those new capabilities, China can bring more leverage to bear in those disputes. And there is an escalation risk for the United States that needs to be recognized. And that is that the United States is militarily stronger than China in almost all measures of military power. There are certain systems that China has chosen to develop and the United States hasn't. But other than those systems, the United States is superior militarily. But a lot of the ways that the United States is superior is that the United States can reduce the capabilities of adversaries relatively early in a conflict. So if we think about the conventional systems that China has built as coercive tools, and we think about some of their nuclear systems, this poses a challenge. Some of the most potent conventional systems that China has created to raise potential costs to adversaries are conventionally tipped ballistic missiles on mobile systems and submarines. Well, China's modernized nuclear force is made up of what? Nuclear-tipped, solid-fueled mobile missiles and submarines, submarine-launched ballistic missiles. The problem is, in a crisis, in order to protect U.S. forward deployed forces, it might be tempting for American commanders or the American commander-in-chief to try to strike at those conventional capabilities to protect American forward deployed forces from those higher costs of operating in the region. That makes sense. The problem is the kinds of attacks, particularly if there were attacks on the Chinese mainland, either against submarine ports or command and control facilities, or against mobile missile sites or the command and control facilities that control those missiles. We've never launched such a thing against a nuclear power before. And in the case of China, there's a dangerous overlap in the types of systems that China uses for nuclear deterrence and what it uses for conventional coercion. So if command and control systems and mobile missile sites were struck, or command and control systems for submarines were struck, and submarines were struck, and submarine ports were struck, a Chinese leader might think the United States is trying to use conventional means to take out the nuclear deterrent with potential escalatory implications. And that's a very dangerous situation that we didn't face during the Cold War.